Starting at the top here, okay, with the fact that Ilia Topuria ultimately was announced by the UFC that he will be vacating the featherweight title. Will be vacating the featherweight title. Hasn't yet. It's one of those things where when the first punch is thrown, he's going to vacate. And that's because the first punch being thrown would be in a title fight that happens between Diego Lopez and former champ Alexander Volkanovski at UFC 314. A lot to talk about here with those two things, but I'm going to start here with Ilia. You might know where I'm going with this, all right? Nobody should have a problem with Ilia Topuria's move to lightweight. He's doing it right. He's doing it the right way. He's doing it the right way.
He is. So I guess I'll say not an overreaction. I mean, I think I could see some people not being thrilled with the way this is unfolding, especially Islam Makhachev, who's made his feelings very clear, I think, about an Ilia Topuria fight. Although I do think if UFC offered it to him, he would take it. But yeah, I don't think you can complain too much about the way this unfolded. He put the division before himself, assuming everything Dana White said was accurate. We have yet to hear, as the time of this recording, from Ilia himself, outside of some faint reporting out of Russia that's a teammate of Ilia said whatever. We haven't heard directly from the horse's mouth when it comes to this, but Dana said, he feels he's done everything he can do in the division. I disagree with that, but he can't make the weight anymore comfortably. I think that is the one you have to circle big time.
Respect that one at least.
Yeah, Ilia has missed weight before or had to pull out of a fight like on fight week because he wasn't able to make the weight. So this is something clear to him. He's spoke about lightweight for years. He's fought at lightweight in the UFC once against Jai Herbert. So the precedent is there for a foundation for him to move up. It's just all the circumstances around it. Him being a standing UFC champion, feeling like he's on the cusp of being one of the sport's great true superstars, and then you feeling like if he did go to lightweight, they had this easy champion versus champion promotional tool to do with him having the belt. But who knows how long that's going to be? Does he want to build his body up for 6 to 8 months to be a true lightweight, as opposed to just going in there without the proper timing? So a lot of questions to still ask him, but yeah, like on paper, allowing the division to move on, citing all the reasons, whether you agree or disagree with them, it was all there fair. So I don't think it's an overreaction to say he did this properly.
Yeah, I mean, that was my whole thing. I the weight was the big thing. I'm not saying that he's accomplished everything he could accomplish at featherweight. Clearly, he had challenges behind him. Movsar Evloev, Diego Lopez. He could have taken those fights, but I have said on this program before, knocking out Max and knocking out Volk in one calendar year. Really feeling like that's like the pinnacle of that division. I understand where Ilia's coming from. I respect the fact that we'll see, he's willing to give up the title, but do you foresee here, this is a little tricky, do you see here though that he would give up the featherweight title willingly and not get a title shot against Islam right away because because you're giving away financial security when you give up the title? It can't just be to fight somebody in the top 5 of lightweight, can it?
I mean, it could be depending on timing. I don't think it's unrealistic. And Dana White said it himself when asked this question essentially directly at the UFC Seattle post-fight press conference. He said, it's not a lock that it'll be Islam. We're looking at other options. And, after all this news broke, I kind of threw you like my crazy theory on Slack, what I think could maybe see happening here. I could see Ilia fighting another guy. We have heard Charles Oliveira has been promised the title shot. And I said on the show before, with the Sean Strickland scenario, right, at middleweight, there was all a fight that we kind of desired more in Khamzat Chimaev, but the UFC allegedly gave Sean Strickland their promise, their word. He was next. They ended up living up to it. We can say that was a bad decision in hindsight, but I want to be on the side of the fighters here. And if you are getting promises from the UFC, hopefully they would stick to those. So if we do get, say, a Charles Oliveira fight with Islam Makhachev in the summer, maybe Ilia fights a Dustin Poirier or something like that, and then we end up getting the winners against each other. If you're a Dustin Poirier fan, if you're a supporter, obviously we are over here, I would be sad to kind of see him fight Topuria in his retirement fight, because I think that would be really difficult for him. But if you're trying to use whatever is left of Dustin Poirier's star power, do a clean transition for Ilia into the lightweight division with a top-ranked guy who is beloved across the sport, you could do a lot worse than having him beat Dustin Poirier and then setting up a title shot after that. So I do think it is in play. It's just a question of behind the scenes, like, did the UFC still promise him pay-per-view points? Dustin Poirier said as recently, I think, to MMA Fighting yesterday, that his fight for retirement will likely be in New Orleans, and it'll potentially be a pay-per-view. If both guys are getting pay-per-view points, you could still have Ilia versus Dustin headline a numbered UFC events. So the options are in play here. I do think Ilia could end up fighting someone else before, but it's just going to be, is Islam Makhachev's team willing to draw a line in the sand in the stance of feeling Ilia has to do something at lightweight first?
Right.
And has the promise been made to Charles Oliveira? So I think those could be the wrenches in play here.
Okay, well, let me just throw one more wild card at you. Where could Max Holloway fit into all of this? BMF championship, Mike. BMF championship. Could we get a BMF title between Ilia and Max Holloway, perhaps?
A rematch. I mean, it's a hard sell, right? After we just saw in that fight, it would be tough. I mean, for Max,
you could do it though. If you were going to make an exception of a rematch off of a knockout like that, because that fight was pretty good up until that point.
It was,
yeah, it was one of those like it was going pretty well. It was really entertaining. I don't know, man. You could sell me on a rematch between those two guys.
Yeah, I think Max it would be just
the first knockout of his career.
Yeah, just the only thing that's tough for me is like we just saw that as a title fight at featherweight, and now we're gonna do it again at lightweight when Ilia.
You're right. You're right. He needs if he's gonna prove himself against somebody, he's gonna prove himself against an actual lightweight. Max still has the featherweight feeling to him as well. It's probably got to be someone like Dustin or Charles or someone else in the top 5, maybe an Armand.
Yeah, I mean, I think given that scenario I just said, if Ilia does end up fighting Islam Makhachev next, I think the easy move staring you in the face is you do Charles and Max the rematch for the BMF title. That's an easy move for me. And then I don't know where that leaves Arman Sarukian, but lightweight's tricky right now. These aren't bad problems to have though, I don't think.
No, lightweight looks like it could be real fun coming up real soon.
MMA Junkie AI.